There's a couple things going on with the Green Bay Packers that I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure the average fan totally understands. Okay? And part of it is you're reacting to some of us on TV and some of us on radio. Some of it you're reacting to kind of pure emotion. Right? But I look at it and I say to myself, we've gone crazy with our infatuation over finding Aaron Rodgers' weapons. Peter King made it out like they're running Aaron Rodgers off right now. Stephen A. Smith, the same. Twitter lost its damn mind. Aaron Rodgers was done wrong. First thing is, if you want to tell me the Packers don't respect Aaron Rodgers, then why the hell they give him more money than anybody in the history of the sport last offseason? Why? Secondly, there is this thing, okay? There is an expression in the NFL, and it goes like this for the draft. Do not reach for a need, right? Do not reach for a need. I tell people all the time, don't shop hungry. You ever been really hungry and you went grocery shopping and you come home and you're like, man, why the hell did I buy that? I was like, because I was starved. Or better yet, now you can't go into a restaurant, but when you order from a restaurant and you're just starved and you pick it up and you eat it, it's the first time, you're like, that was amazing. You go get it the second time, you're not that hungry. You're like, that wasn't that good. I was just super, super hungry, right? Don't shop hungry. Don't shop hungry. You shop hungry, you're going to buy things you don't need, and you come home, you're like, what did you buy? What is all this stuff? Sorry, man, I was just starved. And you get home and you eat it, you ravage it, and you're like, you just look around and you feel terrible, and you look and you've spent way too much money. Okay? Don't tweet angry. That's a Twitter rule. And in the NFL, it's don't reach for a need. And if you thought the Packers needed another wide receiver, okay, that's fair. Maybe they do. Maybe Lazard's not your cup of tea. Maybe there are other young wide receivers. They're not as good as Devontae Adams. That'd be fine. Well, they need a tight end. There wasn't a tight end with a first round grade. No tight ends went in the first round. No other wide receivers went in the 20s and beyond. Right after the kid from Arizona State went, nobody else was available. Had a first round grade. You don't know their draft board. So the first thing is don't reach for a need if you needed a wide receiver, if you needed a tight end. The other rule is, and the Kansas City Chiefs were the only team to violate this rule, don't spend a first-round pick on a running back, right? And by the way, they have a good running back in Aaron Jones. Could they use another one? Sure. Did they take one later in the draft? They did. For the most part, their draft was a bunch of dudes that you don't know if they're any good because they didn't catch touchdown passes or run for touchdowns when you watched college football, right? You guys are fed this narrative that it's the best wide receiver draft in years. Okay. Guess we'll find out. But I saw this tweet from Cole Cubelic, who I do think does a good job. It's very important I point this out. I don't think he's bad at his job, and this is not factually inaccurate in any way, but it lacks nuance. It lacks context. Drew Brees has thrown 104 touchdown passes to first-round picks. Tom Brady, 105. Peyton Manning, 293. Brett Favre, 127. Dan Marino, 84. Phillip Rivers, 35. Aaron Rodgers thrown one, and that's to Mercedes Lewis, who is past his prime after spending most of his career in Jacksonville. Ben Roethlisberger, 69. If you just look at this list, you would think because Peyton Manning threw 293 touchdown passes to first-round picks, you would think that Peyton Manning was given the greatest depth of wide receiving talent of any of these quarterbacks. You know what's interesting about that? Remember what Jim Irsay has said time and again? This is kind of dating back when Andrew Luck was their quarterback. You remember what he said about the Peyton Manning era? Man, we wish we gave him more. We wish he gave him better. We wish we supported him more. Well, what do you mean? He threw 293 passes. Obviously, some of that is Denver as well. Do you know what he means? They didn't have a good enough offensive line. Right? They didn't. They had Reggie Wayne. They had Marvin Harrison. Right? They wish they had a better offensive line. And Edgerrin James. The fact is that Aaron Rodgers, with 3 exceptions, has been on a playoff team. 3 exceptions during his illustrious career as a starting quarterback. And Aaron Rodgers, if healthy over the next 2 or 3 years, he's untradeable, uncuttable. He's going to be the starter for at least the next 2 years, which takes him to 37 years old. And unlike Tom Brady, he has been hurt quite a bit. Never hurt a knee. I guess he did hurt a knee a little bit first game last year against the Bears, 2 years ago against the Bears, and he was limited some, but still played kind of through it. But collarbones and some soft tissue stuff and the calf, when they lost to the Seahawks, kind of limited their play calling, etc. If you look at this, Ben Roethlisberger hasn't had any sort of guys to throw to, when the truth is, Ben Roethlisberger had Antonio Brown. Ben Roethlisberger had Le'Veon Bell. Ben Roethlisberger's had plenty of dudes. They're just not first-round draft pick dudes. You know why that is? Because wide receivers are really, really hard to evaluate. Don't believe me? Who's been a better talent evaluator than Bill Belichick? And who's been worse at evaluating first-round draft pick wide receivers than Bill Belichick? Or wide receivers in general? Right? N'Keal Harry's a perfect example. Philip Dorsett. What do you got? Those are 2 first-round picks that the Patriots had that both stink. In comparison to Wes Welker, undrafted. Julian Edelman, I think it was a 7th-round pick. Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez, right? Rashae Caldwell, Troy Brown. Where's the top pick? They don't exist. They just don't. But if you read this list, you think, well, Phillip Rivers, only 35 touchdown passes to first round picks. Has anyone ever said Phillip Rivers didn't have weapons? No. Even last year. That's why they let him walk in free agency, was because they had weapons. They had a good team. They didn't have a good enough offensive line, and he turned the ball over too much. Maybe because of the offensive line, maybe because of age. We got to stop with we don't give him enough. Like, what is a weapon? Ask any offensive guy, any NFL guy, what's the greatest weapon a quarterback can have? A good running game. That starts with the offensive line, and that starts with having a diverse amount of running backs. Right? And you can say having a running game is not a bad word. It elongates your career. That's what the Patriots tried to do for Tom Brady. So and the stats are misleading. You act like you hadn't had players around him. Oh, okay. Greg Jennings, Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams, all second-round picks. Could they have taken one in the second round? They absolutely could have. But by the time they drafted in the second round, there was already a run on them. What, you want them to just take a second-round pick because that they don't believe in? And oh yeah, by the way, in 2014, perfect example. In the first round, they drafted Clinton Dix, who was good, not great when he was a Packer. The wide receivers that were selected up until Devontae Adams was taken at 53 overall. You ready for it? Kelvin Benjamin. Is he still in the league? Kelvin Benjamin was like a biscuit short of being a tight end. Yes, I know he played early on for the Carolina Panthers, but he was not nearly the player he was at Florida State. Marquise Lee, who just got cut and now signed by the Patriots. Jordan Matthews, who's had a bunch of injuries, bounced around, had some decent parts of his career, and Paul Richardson has been up and down. Looked like the Packers made another good pick. But he's not a first rounder, so they didn't give him weapons. You know? If you think a second or third or fourth round pick would have somehow made you sleep better at night, because do you think that guy is definitely going to help Aaron Rodgers win this year? The answer is no. And if you want to tell me that neither does Jordan Love, that's okay. Jordan Love was taken for a reason. Aaron Rodgers, your quarterback, if he's healthy, they're not winning less than 10, 11 games, which means they're not going to be in position to draft in the top 10. If you're not drafting the top 10, you're not going to get the best quarterbacks. So if you have a guy who you think could develop into a guy in the right time span, right? It's all about when he's going to be good. Jordan Love's not going to be any good for 3 or 4 years. And guess what? Aaron Rodgers is essentially under contract for the next 3 years. And if you get to when Aaron Rodgers is 38 years old and he's still so good that you don't want to play Jordan Love, you know what you can do? Trade Jordan Love. And no one will know if he can really play or not. No one knew if Garoppolo could play. Right? Garoppolo was at 1.5 games with the Patriots as the starter. Nobody knew. Nobody knew. Yes, Dan Byer.
I think in the tweet that Cole sent out, there were a lot of interesting names there. And Drew Brees was one that popped up because he's the all-time leader in touchdown passes. Mm-hmm. And when I think of Drew Brees, I think of Michael Thomas most recently.
Second-round pick.
Yep. Jimmy Graham.
Yep.
Marcus Colston was a 7th-round pick.
Yep.
None of those guys were first-round picks. But there's also another level to this, and I don't want to poke holes in the tweet to say this and this and that. But when I looked at Drew Brees' 104 touchdown passes to first-round picks, mm-hmm. Reggie Bush, LaDainian Tomlinson, Mark Ingram, C.J. Spiller, Ben Watson, Jeremy Shockey, none of them are wide receivers.
Yes.
You know,
yes, wide receivers are hard. It's really hard position to evaluate. Really hard. The route tree is the same, but the skill set is so different in the NFL. It's a great point you made. How many times? LaDainian Tomlinson led the NFL in touchdowns. Okay? How many of those were to LaDainian Tomlinson? And you mentioned Reggie Bush, right? Which is basically what they have now with Alvin Kamara, who, by the way, was 3rd-round pick. Right? It's a great point you make, Dan Byer. Outstanding point. So, look, I'm not attacking Cole Cubelic because what he stated is accurate. Okay? Is accurate. Statistically, if those are the numbers, if you wanted to look it up and those numbers, that's fine. But what it lacks is the context that Dan Byer had, or the context that I'm kind of giving you. And it's the reality of where you draft and who's on your board. Who's on your board? Brian Gutekunst is their general manager. He's done a very nice job of turning over this roster. The Packers are it's not as easy a deal as it looks like because they don't spend a lot of money. You're not getting free agents to go there. Aaron Rodgers is 35. He's not getting younger. You know, you do have a new offense that they're still kind of working through some of the kinks. And you're never going to draft high in the draft as long as you have Aaron Rodgers. But you got to have a guy there, right? For when Aaron Rodgers ages. Otherwise, you leave yourself in this New England Patriots situation. It's almost like, and here's where, if we don't, here's the old, why do I study history? If you don't study history, you're what? Very likely to repeat it. You know? From Hitler doing the exact same thing as Napoleon on down. Right? If you don't attack Russia in the dead of winter, you don't fight a war on two fronts. If you have a star quarterback, he gets to the end of his road, you better have the next guy, because finding the next guy is really hard. The Miami Dolphins have been searching for 20 years. They've been searching for 20 years. They think they have the next guy in Tua. He's coming off what could have been a career-ending hip injury, a couple ankle surgeries, a couple wrist surgeries. He's left-handed, he's 6 feet tall, and he might get heavy later on in life. Like, there's some things against him, and that's the best plan they've been able to do. I mean, they had Ryan Tannehill a couple years ago. He had that 4,000-yard season, they thought, and then he might have torn his ACL, he might not. He tried to play without having surgery, and he didn't even make it through a game. And then he comes back, he's playing pretty well, and he hurts his arm. Like, it is hard to find. It's hard to draft wide receivers. It's even harder to find the next great quarterback. And doing what the Packers did to get Aaron Rodgers, whether or not Jordan Love becomes Aaron Rodgers or not, the idea is the Aaron Rodgers plan. Have him sit 3-4 years, and if he gets a shot, we'll see. I think this tweet and this is the problem with Twitter, it lacks context. And the context is, yeah, Drew Brees thrown a lot to first-round draft picks, but they're not wide receivers. And, oh, yeah, by the way, you would think that Ben Roethlisberger and Phillip Rivers haven't had talented guys to throw to, and that's not accurate. The truth is, what makes you think that first-round draft picks now as wide receivers are easier to evaluate than they were previously? I would say they're harder